Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mary. Thank you for being here with us today, to each of you. And congratulations, Mary, on the cover of Fortune. We were so honored to put you there. And congratulations to 10 years at the helm of GM.
Well, first of all, thanks to you and thanks to the crowd. I'm really honored to be in that position. And I'm so sorry that I can't be live. My schedule didn't allow me to travel. But I'm thrilled to be here virtually and looking forward to having our conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So, Mary, I'm not sure if everybody realizes that between you and your dad, you have like 80 years combined experience at GM. Pretty incredible. You started at the company when you were 18 years old in a stamping plant to help pay for college. At what point did you realize, I could be the CEO of this thing, and actually I want to be the CEO of this thing?
Well, I think it was pretty far in my career. I feel like I've had 10 careers at General Motors, starting as a college co-op student, working in many different areas. But it was when I was in the role of global product development and I understood that I was being considered, that literally was the first time I really thought about it. Through my whole career, though, I always looked for opportunities where I could continue to grow, continue to learn, and continue to have more and more responsibility. So when I understood I was being considered, of course, I went for it. So, and here we are 10 years later.
Incredible. Well, you have been in the role for 10 years. That is 2 to 3 times longer than average, actually, for women at Fortune 500 companies. Those who are fortunate enough to run them, the average is about 4.5 years in the role. And for men, it's 7. So, you're off. And you've done a lot. And there's been a lot of transformation you've had to do. It hasn't been easy. Starting with really your first day on the job, you had a cultural transformation you need to make on your hands. There's a big recall for GM at the time. I think there was even like a SNL skit poking fun at you. There was a lot going on. You've had to deal with a lot. So at the time you had said, everything just felt bad at the company. I'm wondering what steps you made to make morale feel good. How do you do a cultural transformation? What are the important steps to get your employees back engaged through thick and thin?
Well, at that time when I first took the role, one of the things we had been working on prior to me being CEO, named CEO, and also dealing with the ignition switch recall was we'd been working on what our core values were. And so as we got into this difficult period, we really used it as an opportunity to live the values. It's easy to live your values and have a corporate mission statement when everything's going well. But when you're really challenged, that's when people really take notice. And so we demonstrated the values. We also said, look, we're going to do everything in our power to help our customers through this period. We're going to be transparent. And then we're going to do everything possible to make sure something like this never happens again. And that really rallied the team. I would say, though, at that point in time, there was so much being written about General Motors of its culture and that it wasn't right. And I literally felt that pressure. But what I realized is your culture is just a collection of the way people behave every day and what happens to them. Do they go home from work and talk to their neighbor, talk to their child's soccer co-parent, or and say, wow, I had a great day, I'm working on something really exciting, I feel supported and valued? Or do they go home and talk to that same neighbor and say, I had a really tough day at work, I'm trying to do the right thing and I'm just meeting resistance. And so we realized what we needed to do to have the culture that we wanted is to change all of our behaviors and to make sure we were creating that environment where people would feel valued and do their best work. And frankly, that's the journey we've been on through this whole period.
So that's great advice for cultural transformation. It starts at the top with the behaviors that you're setting and really thinking about the impact that it's having on your employees. That's not the only transformation you've had to do. I'm sure a lot of this audience remembers, but many others might not. There was actually a bankruptcy for GM, in the early 2000s, and now the net income for the company is over $10 billion. It's a pretty incredible financial transformation. And one of the core decisions you made that you said was a sea change moment for the company was deciding to scale back on some of the operations outside of the US that just weren't working, and that doing what you've always done, if it's not working, you can't keep doing it. That's not always easy to see, though, when you've been at a company for as long as you have, or when you feel like it worked once, but why isn't it working now? So how do you stay fresh and innovative and just fight complacency and kind of make those decisions that have righted the financial ship?
Well, prior to bankruptcy and the restructuring, I think General Motors felt they had to be everywhere for everyone with every segment. And so as I got into the role and we moved past the ignition switch recall, we realized that our industry was being disrupted, and we made the decision we're going to join and lead the transformation, whether it be electric vehicles, software, autonomy, et cetera. And so with that, we had one of the most important things you do as the CEO is you're very invested in how you deploy capital. And so we started to change the rate of if you're not profitable or you don't have a plan to be profitable, how can we just continue to invest and destroy capital and really destroy our owners' capital, our shareholders. And so that was kind of a big shift within the company that we started in that 14, 15, 16-year time frame of really looking where could we play to win. It wasn't that we just got everywhere that wasn't making money. There were places we stayed because we knew if we invested we could have a strong business, and we're seeing that today. But we had to go through that process and realize that we had to be better stewards of our owners' capital.
And now, the point that we're in with the company, you've gone through an EV revolution. Really, the whole world is experiencing it. And some markets are quicker to adopt it than others. One particularly interesting market for you and for everybody, I think, is China. China has become like this EV epicenter. But it's really hard for outside companies to penetrate there because there's so many companies that are creating cars in China that are funded by state-owned enterprises and by government money. They're so cheap. And we've actually said, while it's been a strong market for you historically, if this keeps going, it could be a race to the bottom at this pricing level. That's really, really hard to compete. And GM has experienced, I think, like half the deliveries today that you were experiencing 6 years ago in the market. So I'm curious, when you think about winning in China for a company like GM, is it possible? And at what point do you apply that same logic that you applied to other operations outside the US that weren't working there?
Sure. Well, when you look at China, there has been a structural change with the shift to electric vehicles and what in China they call new energy vehicles, so either hybrids or electric vehicles, that has caused a shift. And, when you have more than 100 domestic Chinese OEMs entering the market, most of which are losing money, it is exactly as you said, Alyson, it has become a race to the bottom with pricing and the level of subsidies. Generally, I'm a free trader of give me a level playing ground and let's compete based on our product and how well we serve the customer. But that's the situation we're facing now. Now, China's still an important market. It's the largest market, and it still has tremendous growth potential. So at GM, what we're doing is we're working to restructure the business. We're working with our partner to make sure that we can move forward in a way that we can participate differently and still give customers choice for vehicles that may not be created in, from a Chinese OEM that GM has that references our strong brands, the quality, and for instance, right now with our own retail channel, we've just started to take orders for the Chevrolet Tahoe. So we think it's a market after we restructure, we can still participate in an appropriate way, and it can be a business that has growth for General Motors. But it's going to take that change.
And I guess when you look at adoption in China versus adoption in the US for EVs, it seems like there's a lot that potentially we could learn in the US about infrastructure. We still have charging anxiety here in the US that they don't experience there because they've laid out a good network of charging stations in China. I'm curious, what do you think is going on with the US consumer in EVs, with the US market? What do we need to do to get there to be more adoption? Because you still have your goal, I believe, of being pretty gas-free for your vehicles that are lightweight by 2035, but the consumer in the US just seems to be slower to adopt than we had initially thought.
Well, I think the consumer in the US and in most markets is very rational. And so when you look at what has happened in the recent past is cars either didn't meet the range. 300-mile range for the US is kind of a magic number. Otherwise, people have range anxiety. There was not affordable EVs. That's why we're very proud to have the Chevrolet Equinox and Blazer that get into that affordable range, and those vehicles are doing very well as we're ramping them up in the second half of this year. And then also, you mentioned charging infrastructure is so important. I'm really excited that just last month we were able to open up the Tesla charging network, in addition to what we're investing in with Pilot Flying J, the partnership we have with EVgo, and with several other charging networks, because I think every quarter the charging infrastructure gets better. and it's going to open up for more and more people to be able to legitimately consider an EV if it's their only car and they need it for all of their use cases. I think a lot of people who own EVs right now have another ICE vehicle in their garage, so they're not having to make that choice and be so dependent on what the charging infrastructure is. But it will get better, and we finished in the #2 position at the end of September in the U.S. We have started to see growth pick up, and GM right now with our EVs is growing faster than the market. So I think we're going to continue to see it, but customers are going to make rational choices. So we've got to continue to have affordable vehicles that people want to own and drive, that are beautifully designed, and the charging infrastructure needs to continue to improve. I know GM's doing its part, and it will continue.
I wonder, how do you think about, you know where the future is going and you're driving the company there very clearly. This is an EV gas-free future that we want. But that means destroying your historic cash cow, which is still a huge part of your business. Gas cars fuel GM for the moment. So I'm curious, how do you think about building for that future, knowing that your cash cow is going to have to dissipate? That's a scary position to be in, and it can be hard to make for incumbents to be innovative.
Well, I think you have to look at this transformation is going to happen over a decade plus. We are the only full-line manufacturers that has said we want to be all EV for our light-duty vehicles, but we're going to be guided by the customer. And in today's market, we're providing choice. We have great electric vehicles, we have great internal combustion engine vehicles, and the customer, based on where they live, what they need, they can come to General Motors and they're going to have a good choice of either propulsion system. But I think as we go forward and we have more affordable EVs, and we're working, we're on track to be variable profit positive by this year end, and then we're going to continue to work on improving the profitability to get it to like ICE-like margins as we move forward in this decade. And in addition to that, I think when people drive an electric vehicle, they're fun to drive. It opens up all new styling, instant torque, never having to go to the gas station. There's so many positives that we think when people have that experience and trust that there's charging infrastructure to support them, they're going to want to move to an EV. So that's the journey that we're on, but we're going to be flexible based on where the customer is and really be driven by the customer.
And GM really had the first EV on the market in the 1990s. So it was a first mover advantage. Even really almost a decade head start on Tesla. So we should talk about Tesla a little bit because they do own the majority of the market. When you think about the fact that GM was first, like Tesla shouldn't even exist. GM should have it all. Like, what would you redo in hindsight? And what advice would you have to someone who's facing an aggressive startup, maybe even run by Elon?
Well, I think, I am very proud of our history with EV1. I actually think at that point in time where battery technology was, we were ahead of our time. We never stopped working on battery technology within General Motors, and that's what led in 2010 to the Chevrolet Bolt, which was an extended range electric vehicle, and then to the Bolt, Chevrolet Bolt, that was an all EV that got about, around 250 miles of range, that those customers to this day are still some of the most satisfied customers across all OEMs. So I'm very proud of that journey that we're on. I think we learned a lot with the Bolt, and being the fact that we need to make this transition and make sure we take our workforce along, because the jobs we provide, I think, are important to this company, and the jobs that are, whether in the supply base or the dealers, are also very important. We need to make that transformation. Do I wish we would have had some of the EVs we have now a couple of years earlier? Sure. But we realized with the learnings that we had from the Bolt that we needed to dedicate and have a dedicated EV platform, which we started working on in 2018, first rolled out in limited volume with the Hummer in 2021, and now we're ramping up quickly. So the investments we made in 2018 are really what are setting, I think, General Motors apart from a lot of traditional OEMs in being ready and being able to get to profitability. We also invested in the battery raw materials supply chain as well as batteries, and making with our partner LG Energy Solution batteries in the United States is giving us an advantage because of that vertical integration, but with the partnership, we were able to do it very capital efficient. So we're going to continue on this journey, and we'll respond to whatever the market drives, because we've got that flexibility.
The other trend that's happening in your industry, I mean, there's so much, Mary. Like the rest of us are just trying to grapple with AI, and you've got autonomous vehicles that are going to be driving themselves at some point here. And I think that future is actually sooner than we think. I'm curious, when do you think the autonomous future is going to be? And some of the lessons learned that you've experienced through Cruise, you were very aggressive in moving on that technology. You put a lot of resources into it. There was a pretty big hiccup last year that derailed the initiative, but the autonomous future is still there. So how do you think about when we're going to experience that future and like the learnings from Cruise to reset the market expectations for it?
Well, I think the learnings from Cruise, one of the biggest is you've got to work and build the right relationship with the regulators at the local level, the state level, and the federal level when you have a technology that is so transformational. And we believe that when you get to, whether it's a robo-taxi, and it's in unique communities where you have autonomous vehicles and getting all the way to personal autonomous vehicles, which I believe in, that it's going to be safer because they drive knowing all the laws, they don't drive impaired. And so we are trying to move to a safer future. And on that journey, we also have technologies like Super Cruise, which is one of the most trusted driver assistance technologies that really people tell us, once they've experienced Super Cruise, they say, 80% of them say, I either wouldn't buy a car without Super Cruise or I strongly prefer it on my next vehicle. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Clearly, the technology has taken longer than I thought when we first acquired Cruise in 2016. Generative AI and all the advancements happening, I think, have the opportunity to help us accelerate, but we still have work to do. From a Cruise perspective, we're doing driverless testing right now in Houston. And we're going to continue because General Motors believes in personal autonomy and what autonomy can do to help people move not only safer, but give people back that precious commodity of time.
And, well, I hope your autonomous future has seatbelts in it, because I saw some of Elon's mock-ups, and there was not one seatbelt in that robo-taxi. I don't want that future. That doesn't look very safe. But I'm curious.
You still have to comply with laws.
Yeah, exactly. Put the seatbelts in. So, look, with the pace of change being what it is and all that you've experienced, it can be really hard on employees. There's a lot of reskilling that needs to be involved. There's sometimes resistance to change and fear that technology will replace jobs. You have a huge workforce. You've dealt with things like union strikes as change is happening. I'm curious, sort of, how do you keep employees excited about the future that they're building, keep them on target, on task, and also help them be prepared for the future themselves and their roles?
Well, one of the things we've said in this journey, and especially speaking to our manufacturing teams, we really feel that they're a competitive advantage because they know how to safely build high-quality vehicles at rate. And so we have plants right now that have the ability to build ICE or EV, and we'll continue to add to that as we move forward and as EV demand grows. From an overall perspective, it's communicate, communicate, communicate. And I was just in a meeting this morning, we were talking about we need to do more communications to help people understand not only where we're headed and why from an EV perspective, from a software perspective, but also we're going to continue to be agile and flexible to meet the customer where they are, because it is changing. I think a year or two ago, everybody thought it was going to be a straight rocket ship lineup to 100% EV adoption. We're seeing now that, and we never thought it was going to be a straight line. So we've got to adjust, but we've got to make sure our employees know when we adjust why we're adjusting. So we've been communicating. I would say we need to up our game and continue to communicate even more.
And your big vision is a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, zero congestion. I think we're all on board for that. That would be great. But if you've said electrification is the key, and we're still early days really in this EV evolution as well. So I'm curious, when do you think that goal is realistically achievable? And as a leader, how are you preparing for the organization in case it's not during your tenureship, it's 50 years out or at some future state? GM has been around for 116 years. How are you thinking about that long-term vision and your role in it and guiding the org even past your tenureship as CEO?
Well, first of all, I'm having a tremendous amount of fun. I mean, what an opportunity to be, and I'm humbled to lead General Motors during this period of tremendous transformation and opportunity. So as an engineer, it's something very exciting to me. But I think it's having a leadership team that's aligned, and really all of the things we've accomplished are not, from what I've done, but it's what we've done as a team and motivating and engaging our entire workforce, and we're going to continue to do that. But I also think it's making sure we've laid the foundation that next generation continue to build on. And it's because we believe we're moving to vehicles that are better, vehicles and methodologies where we can be safer, and then technologies on the vehicle that are, provide a customer experience we can't even imagine today. So that's what excites me about that journey. I've learned long ago predicting what year something's going to happen is generally wrong. So I'm just going to say we're going to keep marching to that agenda with intent and with speed. And again, not to oversay it, but the customer will dictate how we move, because at the end of the day, tell us if we're right or not. Mm.
And as you think about your leadership, the fact that you've been in this role for 10 years, you've gone through so much transformation, when you're meeting with other CEOs and they're looking for advice on how can I not just survive in this role, but thrive in this role, what do you think is a key characteristic of your leadership that has kept you in this role amid so much change that you would advise other CEOs to think about for their tenureship as well?
Well, I think my learnings, and I've learned a lot from so many other CEOs that I'm grateful for them investing time in me. But what I've learned is first thing is do the right thing even when it's hard. I think too often people think they have a decision. You just got to do the right thing and move forward. That's something I learned very early in my tenure as CEO, going through the ignition switch crisis. The other thing I always say to people is, when's the best time to solve a problem? And they kind of look at me perplexed, and I say, the minute you know you have one. Because problems rarely get smaller. I think the other thing that it's important to know is it's all about the people. I mean, the people of your company are what distinguish you from others in the industry. And so making sure you have an engaged workforce that feels empowered, feels valued is something we continue to work on. So it's about the people, it's about doing the right thing, and it's about solving problems.
Yes, and the problems don't get smaller. I like that advice very much. So thank you, Mary, so much for your time. It's been an engaging conversation, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.